Hi, everyone. Welcome to our introductory webinar on Docstore. My name is Louise Cabansai. I work at the UC Santa Cruz Genomics Institute, where I'm a junior software engineer on Docstore. Before we begin, I just want to remind everyone that this webinar will be recorded and the slides will be posted publicly. And for the format of this webinar, most of the content is a high-level overview of the features that we have on Dockstore's platform, including some demos of how you actually use these features. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A session. Feel free to post questions on the chat. We also can use Zoom's raise hand functionality towards the end if you want to ask your questions live. Charles over here will be fielding questions as we go, so please don't hesitate to ask. And just a reminder that this is actually a series of future webinars that we're going to have. So this one is mostly just a high-level overview of Dockstore's features, but in future webinars we'll be doing trainings on more fundamental parts like how to use Docker, how to write descriptors, etc., and more deeper dive into the advanced components for using Docstore more effectively, like best practices and so forth. So, what is Docstore? I'm going to first give you the full description. Docstore is a free and open source platform for sharing scientific tools and workflows. It's a registry of Docker-based resources described using popular workflow languages like CWL, WDL, and Nextflow. Our goal is to increase the portability, interoperability, and reproducibility of research in the sciences. So portability means workflows should run in any environment that supports Docker. And for interoperability, we follow the GA4GH API standards and support multiple integrations so people can use their preferred compute and data storage environments. But most importantly, Dockstore's strength is focused on reproducibility. So Dockstore is a place for researchers and developers to share their work so that others can use it. And we do this by using a combination of containers and workflow languages, which minimizes redundant and error-prone installation of software. This increases the transparency of methods actually used in the analysis and allows others to verify the results and apply existing methods into their own research. Or in simple terms, Dockstore is really just a platform for sharing research software. You can think about it as an app store for bioinformatics. So how is Dockstore useful and what types of problems does it solve? Well, let's go over first the simplest use case for search and findability. For example, we have a researcher that wants to do some type of genomics work. That could be assembly, alignment, variant calling, or an entire genome-wide association study, or something different. They want to know what software can be used for the job and what works with their data, and where do they download this software and what version should they use. Well, this brings us to Dockstore's function as a registry. So Dockstore is a searchable and centralized catalog of bioinformatics tools and workflows. What this means is Dockstore is integrated with multiple repositories. So the content of Dockstore actually comes from various places. So developers don't have to choose between the platforms that they're already used to. For example, content on Dockstore can come from GitHub, Bitbucket, Quay, Docker Hub, GitLab, or even be hosted directly on Dockstore in some cases. So all these resources come together to form a centralized library for a better user experience and functionality. So let's actually head over to Dockstore and see what that looks like. So this is a Dockstore homepage. I'm currently logged out right now, but you can register for Dockstore using your GitHub or Google credentials. So I'm going to log in right now. And as you can see, I'll log in with my GitHub credentials. And I can choose to connect my Dockstore account with my GitHub account, my Google account, Quay, Bitbucket, GitLab, or even my Zenodo account if I want to create a digital object identifier so that I can link my content on Dockstore to any publications that I may have. And by connecting your accounts, actually, when you go to your dashboard to see the work that you have on Dockstore, this populates like the content that I have on GitHub that works with our platform, like anything that I have that's a descriptor of the languages that we're supporting. And this gives me more control of what users see by being able to publish or just having what the specific ones I want, what specific versions I want to be available, just in case I'm still working on some things. All right. And so because of that, we have a variety of content on Dockstore. And the best way to go through Dockstore is using our search functionality or our other features. So let's go ahead and look at search. So this is our search page. You can easily navigate here from the home page or up here in the banner. So for example, let's search for a popular option, the GATK tools. So as you can see, a couple of search results come up. Some of these are actually posted on here by actual developers of GATK workflows, and some of them are more customized versions that people are using. You can use the facets that we have here to filter by, say, the certain descriptor type you're looking for, or if you have a particular author, etc. But as you can see, there's actually quite a few things that pop up, whether it's a tool or a workflow. And this can make the search process a little more difficult to go through. So Dockstore actually has another useful feature, which is our organizations and collections pages. So our organizations pages are a place for groups, labs, consortiums, collaborators, etc., to showcase their work and their projects. You could create collections, which are groupings of workflows curated for certain purposes, and you can give markdown descriptions of your entire organization or by the collection. So let's go ahead and see this in action. So this is the Anvil organization page, and you can see some workflows that they have here on Dockstore that work on their platform. One of those is the GATK4 collection. So actually in these collections, you also have an option to give the collection itself its own markdown description and navigate to the specific workflows it uses. Or you can actually go directly to the Broad Institute's page, where they have more GATK best practices workflows available for you to easily find and use. So the organizations pages are basically a way for groups to showcase their work and make sure that collaborators or reviewers are using the proper software or versions for a project. Let's go to a more common use case. So this is more about simplifying the installation process. For example, a researcher might already know what software they want to use, but they're really bogged down and are having problems installing the software. This could be for a variety of reasons. The software was built on a different operating system so that the executable files don't run on their machine, or other problems like the software just doesn't build for some mysterious reason. This could be due to a variety of issues like dependency problems. The software requires a different version of a dependency. This is really common if you use Java, Python, for example, than the one that's installed on your machine. Or another common dependency problem is that multiple tools need the same dependency. Multiple tools, for example, use Python, but they need different versions of Python. And how does a user balance between something that needs Python 2 and also using a software that maybe needs Python 3? And this can get more and more complex as the software goes. So what is Dockstore's solution? Well, Dockstore packages the content on the platform in a certain way. So software is packaged using containerization technology, and then its usage is described in a descriptor language. So Docstore currently supports the descriptor languages CWL, which is the common workflow language, WDL, which is the workflow descriptor language, and Nextflow. And so the combination of using these two technologies allows analysis to move from cloud to cloud, virtual machine to virtual machine, server to server, and still be guaranteed to run on any environment as long as it supports Docker. And just a little aside, while Dockstore currently supports just Docker containers, we're looking into more containerization technologies such as Singularity or uDocker, and how we can convert existing containers to different types. But let's dive more into this. So the content on Dockstore is packaged up, but it's also available into two types. You'll see on Dockstore tools and workflows. And what is exactly the difference between the two? Well, a tool is a single container, but it's still described using a descriptor language. A workflow, on the other hand, can have multiple containers, and that is also still described in using a descriptor language. But to have a more concrete example, for example, a tool is something like BWA-mem. So all the software and code and the dependencies that are required to run the BWA-mem program are packaged in a Docker container. That includes the operating system that it was made in, the binary executable files that actually run, the programming languages it supports, and anything like the compiler, etc. Whereas a workflow might look more like an entire variant calling pipeline. So for example, the pipeline has multiple steps like processing, alignment, and then actually calling the variants. And that might go through a variety of tools, from BWA-mem to SAM tools to the actual aligner tools, and then finally the program that's calling the variants. And those might have different dependencies for each one. And so how you can make sure all these different tools and parts work together is by containerizing each specific tool so that it works as expected. But let's get a little more detailed into what exactly do we mean by containers and descriptors and these things called parameter files and how they come together to make this experience more usable. So first, I've gone into this a bit, but a container is packaged up code, all its dependencies. This allows for portable software that runs quickly and reliably from one computing environment to another. So if you're moving from your local machine or if you're moving something to a larger compute or cloud environment. But the descriptor. So like I've underlined here, script, the descriptor is actually the script that describes how to run your workflow or tool in the pipeline. So this is actually where you state which tools to use, which, as in pointing to which containers, what steps to run and when to run them, do alignment, after you process the data and then call your variants. You define what parameters are required in your workflow, such as it needs a BAM file, or it needs this much compute, this much memory to run. Or you can even include metadata into your descriptor, like who is the author, how do you contact the person, or even a brief description of what this tool is used for. And then finally, we have the parameter file. So parameter files used by Docstore are supported in either the JSON or YAML format. And this is where you specify the actual input and output of which files you're going to be using. So in your descriptor, you're kind of putting more the abstract, use a BAM file, use some memory, but in your parameter file, you're actually going to give the full path, the HTTP path, to where that file can be downloaded, or if it's on a Google bucket, or if it's on an S3 bucket, or if it's even just a local file. And you're going to also be specifying actually use like 100 gigabytes of memory, this many cores, doing so many parallel processes, etc. So let's actually go ahead and look at a workflow. So I'm going to use a workflow developed by some grad students and postdocs here at UC Santa Cruz. It's a structural variant calling workflow, and it's part of the Biodata Catalyst project. And this was their organization page, and this is the collection it's on. I'll navigate here. So this is the workflow landing page that you'll see on Docstore. Here, you'll first see the information tab, which contains things like where is the code actually hosted? Like, for example, this code is on GitHub, but it's been registered to Docstore. You'll have some workflow version information, like who actually wrote this descriptor, and how to contact them. These are all optional fields that you can specify, and a brief description. So some descriptor languages actually let you to use a full markdown description, and a future Docstore feature is actually going to be so that you can actually just upload or specify a path to a full markdown description. So let's look at what we just talked about. So let's look at the descriptor files. So this descriptor is the actual script on how to run this file. As you can see here, they're specifying what type of file is needed and the individual steps to call and the specific tasks in this workflow. You could look over to the tools page, and it kind of gives a more summary of each specific task ID that is in this workflow and what Docker container it's using for that task. Now let's go back to files and look at the test parameters. So this is actually where you can customize an existing parameter file that was given by the author with your own data. So I just also want to take a brief moment to remind everyone that I'm going through some big concepts right now on like containers, descriptors, and parameter files. We'll actually, in our future webinars, give them more hands-on training on how to actually make these files and give people more of a thorough training on how to make content so that you can share and put things on Docstore. All right, so, and you can also look at the different versions of this workflow so that maybe you need a specific version or you want to try something different. And then if we head over to the Launch tab, you can see what actual commands are used to run this workflow. So right here, we have the option to to run locally with the Dockstore command line interface. And so Dockstore has this CLI, which we provide for people to use on their own local machines, or if they want to install it and say an instance on the cloud. But this is more like a developer handy tool. But I'll go ahead and demo how this works. All right. So here we have my terminal page. I'm in a directory that I've made for this webinar. In here, I have already a JSON parameter file. We can go ahead and look into it. And I've specified a smaller subset that can be used on my local machine to run this workflow. Like, for example, what input FASTA files to put in, what the name of the sample is, and some reference information that's necessary to run this workflow. And here are some more compute details that I can input in. If the machine you're working on doesn't support some of these variables, some of these might work, some of these might be more for, say, if I'm spawning a cluster or moving or creating an instance on the cloud, like how that should be constructed. But since I'm on running this on my local machine, it's actually going to ignore anything that doesn't apply, but it'll still run. And that's the important part. So I'm going to run the command. So the Docstore CLI, which you can download and install and find the instructions on our site. And I'm going to be running a workflow. I'm going to say launch it and specifying the entry on Docstore. So this is the identifier on Docstore. And it's going to actually grab this workflow from Docstore and run it on my machine. So as you can see, the descriptor is not on my machine. I only have the parameter JSON files. And that's good. Let me go back and grab that command. All right, so I'm going to give it the small JSON file that I've made, and it's going to set off the run. It's creating temporary directories, and right now what it's doing is grabbing those files from the S3 buckets that are stored in, and it's going to call out to Cromwell, which is the actual execution engine that's running this workflow. This is a small sample set, so it should run pretty quickly, but I actually have here what the output already looks like. So as you can see here, it's a bit verbose still, but as you can see, the workflow finished successfully. It put the files into these temporary directories that it made, so that if I want to go and see where my output of this workflow is sent to, I can navigate to those directories. All right, so I use the Dockstore command line interface, which is the handy resource that we provide to our users, so that I could run this content locally using Dockstore content. And the CLI will actually do some handy things like pull the workflow descriptor from Dockstore, or be able to provision a sample template of a JSON file so that I can fill it in. And then it'll call automatically to Cromwell to run WDL workflows or CWL tool. And then also provision output files into specified directories. What if you have a more complex use case? This is another situation where Dockstore comes in handy. For example, what if you are in a larger collaboration with multiple institutions, or your data is actually just such a large scale that it's impossible to run this analysis locally. So for example, a team of collaborators from 6 different institutions are working together on a study that analyzes the genomes of thousands of individuals. But each institution uses a different compute environment, and that can vary from their local workstations, their local machines, small servers that they have to develop these tools and workflows, or even when they're ready to do large-scale analysis using various cloud platforms or custom high-performance compute clusters. This can be bogged down by problems like the pipeline or the script, maybe it's a bash script, is designed to work for one institution's machines or types of data, but that can't be easily interchanged or doesn't scale properly at another institution's computing environment. Or what's even worse is maybe everything seems to have installed correctly, but the output from one compute environment to another differs, even if you have the same input, which is a huge reproducibility problem. And so that's really the strength of why we use containers, descriptor languages on the Dockstore platform to package up these tools and workflows. It's so that analysis can be done reliably and can be moved from environment to environment to allow people to do these types of collaborations and do work at a higher scale. So that solution leads to the interoperable cloud ecosystem that Dockstore is part of. So Dockstore follows the GA4GH standardized APIs, which allows Dockstore to connect to a variety of cloud execution and data storage environments. And that means you can move these descriptors, these containers, from environment to environment more easily and more readily, so you can just focus on doing your actual research and analysis. Currently, directly from Dockstore, you can connect to DNA Stack, Terra, DNA Nexus, the Cancer Genomics Cloud, and port your workflows directly into those execution environments, and then also bring data from wherever it's stored. So let's actually look at how this works in a live demo. So I've shown you here that this is the same workflow that we just ran locally, but now I want to go actually do something on a larger scale. The small developer set that I test locally on my machine seems to work. Now I want to run it on more genomes, whole genomes, or I want to run it on my own data. So I'm going to actually go and import this workflow into Terra, I guess export using our launch with feature. And so you can see the descriptor file right here. And I'm going to select the workspace in Terra that I want this workflow to be sent. All right. So, so the workflow is now imported to Terra, and I have to specify the inputs that I want to run this analysis with. I'm going to upload a JSON file that I've made for this purpose. So it's a larger JSON file, but still small, just to show that this analysis, to be more quick on how this analysis launches. Let me save that. So you can see the difference between what inputs are required and which inputs are optional. And then I'm going to launch this. Here we go. And so this workflow is now going to create a Google instance with the specified compute parameters. It's going to be automatically charged to my billing account and run. So right now the workflow is queued. It's still prepping that environment, but I can show you how it looks like when it's finished. So this is a call that this is a workflow that I've previously executed. You can see the status was successful. You can see what tasks that were defined in the descriptor ran, and then you can see the inputs and outputs of those tasks and link to them. What was inputted, and then the outputs were sent to a Google bucket, which I can fetch. And then now I'm free to do more downstream analysis and focus on what the results were of that. These were just some slides these are pretty much just the same slides that I did live. All right. And pretty much that is the main high-level overview. If you want to learn more, we have plenty of documentation and tutorials on the Docstore website to go more into how the content that we'll be also showcasing in future webinars, such as how to get started with Docker or any of the descriptor languages we support, how to actually launch tools and workflows, and other features that we have that we didn't cover here today. So please check that out on our docs page. And just to finish it off, let's look at the Dockstore ecosystem. So this slide is actually from another presentation we gave back in July. And it's back then we took account, we had 450 tools and workflows available on the platform. And we're very thankful to our community members who've pulled all this stuff together, who've created content to be shared with other researchers. So as you can see, we've gotten started with quite a few people, with quite a few collaborators already, and our content is growing each day. So thank you very much for everyone who's contributed to this effort. And thank you very much to the Dockstore team whose contributions make this possible. And especially our funders who help make sure that we can provide this open source and free platform for researchers. All right, so reminder, we're going to be having more future hands-on training webinars to go into a deeper dive into the advanced components of Dockstore and train people who've never really written in a descriptor language or never have really written a Docker container, or even some basics like how to use GitHub and how to use Quay, etc. So follow us on Twitter, check out our page so that we can keep you up to date on those things. But now we're going to start our Q&A session. Charles has been fielding questions for us. You can also use Zoom's raise hand feature, which you'll find by clicking the participants button on the Zoom interface and using the raise hand function.
So yeah, there are no questions. Oh, here's a question from John. So I'll just read it out loud. And question, if we have time on the difference between tools and workflow, are there situations where it would make sense to make a workflow with one single tool container rather than a tool to run with a CLI or on the cloud Terra maybe?
Yeah, that's entirely possible. It's more of a free-form kind of choice. It's not saying you can't have a workflow with only one tool or container. It's as you can see, like with a tool, they're kind of designed so that you can easily put different tools together to possibly make a workflow, but there's no like restriction on making a workflow that uses only one container.
Okay. Then we have a question from Melissa Manning. As we develop containers for our tools and workflows, which container registry should we use?
So we support containers from both Docker, Docker Hub, and Quay. The difference is mainly for Quay has a public API, so we can actually, it's more of a continuous integration, continuous development process that we can actually see, and that Dockstore's platform can communicate with, that the container has updated. And so that updating can be seen on Dockstore's site. For example, Docker Hub would just be pointing to a container, but we don't necessarily see the automatic updates that are happening on Quay.
Yeah, I would also add, I don't think we have like an official position. I mean, like you can use whichever registry you would like.
Yes.
I mean, it's ultimately up to you.
Yes, that's one of the, I guess, tenets of Dockstore, why we support multiple integrations, is so people can use the formats that they're used to or prefer.
Yeah, no other questions so far. If you'd like to ask, please go ahead. And as Louise said, you can also, if you want to ask your question verbally, you can do the raise hand thing.
For that, actually, as you can see, for the ways to register into Dockstore, this is kind of just giving an overview of Quay versus hosting on, say, Docker Hub. You can see that it's say your descriptor plus the Docker file was hosted on GitHub, Bitbucket, etc. Dockstore's API can detect how the Quay's build system actually makes each successive version of the next Docker file. Any more questions?
We don't have anything else. Maybe it's a last call for questions. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and wrap it up, I think.
Thanks for joining, everybody. Please stay tuned for our future more hands-on training webinars.
Yeah, thank you. And